Critics and Oscar voters don't know much compared to someone who's actually been shot at. These are the 12 World War II movies that the people who've actually worn a uniform say you need to see. This was actually the last big World War II movie Hollywood shot in black and white. John Wayne stars as a naval officer who gets demoted after Pearl Harbor, but later gets another chance to prove himself against the Japanese in the Pacific. Kirk Douglas and Patricia Neal co-star, plus you've got Burgess Meredith and Henry Fonda backing them up, so the cast is rock solid. No wonder this movie is actually Martin Scorsese's personal favorite war film. Compared to other war movies, this one is pretty bleak. Douglas's character even assaults a nurse, who then takes her own life. Both he and Wayne's characters deal with things like drinking, affairs, grief, stuff movies back then usually didn't touch. It's pretty dark, but that's exactly why veterans recommend it. One said, besides the tremendous cast, it brings viewers close to the real actions of the U.S. Navy during the Second World War. 6 decades later, it's still compelling. Operation Market Garden was a disastrous Allied mission in Holland during the war, and A Bridge Too Far basically tries to recreate it as realistically as possible, even down to the smallest details. This movie has one of the craziest casts ever. Robert Redford, Sean Connery, Anthony Hopkins, Gene Hackman, James Caan, just non-stop stars in even the smallest roles. But when it first came out, critics were tough. Roger Ebert even famously called it the longest B-grade war movie ever made. They felt it collapsed under its own huge ambition. Too many stars, too much happening, just exhausting to watch. Years later, opinions have shifted. Even if it still feels a bit long, veterans specifically appreciate it for being honest. It wasn't some feel-good Allied victory story. As one veteran put it perfectly, this wasn't an Allied victory, but showed the determination of soldiers from across Europe coming together, and how their lack of resources combined to defeat them. Alec Guinness stars here as Colonel Nicholson, a British officer captured by the Japanese. He and his fellow prisoners get forced to build this impossible bridge in brutal conditions. But Nicholson becomes so obsessed with proving British superiority through their bridge-building skills, it basically blinds him to the bigger picture. This movie's different because it doesn't argue about the morality of the war. Instead, it's about individual soldiers desperately hanging onto their discipline, their pride, just to stay sane. Guinness gives one of his all-time best performances here, and the movie swept the Oscars, 7 wins total. But the reason people highlight this one goes beyond the acting or awards. One vet explained, "I enjoyed the depth of the personalities portrayed because emotions are a true reflection of one of war's greatest tragedies." Ask any veteran for essential World War II movies, and Patton always comes up. This is easily one of Hollywood's most famous biopics, with George C. Scott absolutely crushing it as General George Patton. From that iconic opening speech in front of a giant American flag onward, Scott completely owns this movie. It won 7 Oscars out of 10 nominations, including Best Actor, which Scott famously refused to accept because he didn't believe acting should be competitive. President Nixon even screened it at the White House. It was reportedly his favorite movie ever. Veterans especially appreciate how the film captures Patton as a real, complicated human being. It doesn't sanitize his flaws or eccentricities. It shows them fully. The only foreign language film on this list, this one is a West German classic about life aboard a submarine, U-96. There's no big epic battle it's based on specifically. It's all about the experience. It's adapted from a novel written by Lothar Günther Buchheim, who actually served aboard a real U-boat, and the filmmakers went to massive lengths to keep everything as historically accurate as possible. Since it first came out, the movie's been re-edited and released multiple times, even expanded into a miniseries version. But no matter the cut, it always stays incredibly tense, claustrophobic, and realistic. People love it exactly because of that authenticity and atmosphere. As one vet simply put it, who doesn't love a submarine movie? This is the best of all of them. Even if you've never seen The Great Escape, you probably still know it. Steve McQueen doing those legendary motorcycle jumps. It's based on an actual prison break, though obviously Hollywood took some creative liberties. The cast is stacked. Besides McQueen, you've got James Garner, Charles Bronson, Richard Attenborough. Quentin Tarantino's even openly paid homage to it in his own films. It's that influential. But for actual veterans, the appeal isn't just the cast or action scenes. One veteran described exactly what makes this movie special: the prisoners' patience in planning, delegating duties, and their ingenuity at problem-solving to execute such a daring plan shows what can be done in times of adversity. This movie is basically the gold standard for big Hollywood World War II epics. Adapted from Cornelius Ryan's book, it's about the D-Day invasion of Normandy, and the cast is ridiculously stacked. John Wayne, Robert Mitchum, Richard Burton, Sean Connery, Henry Fonda. Seriously, just about every big star of the time shows up here. But what makes it special isn't just the big names. Producer Frank McCarthy was obsessed with getting every detail right. He hired historians from both sides, Germans and Allies, to make sure the whole thing was accurate. No surprise it was a massive hit. Over $50 million in box office in 1962, over $500 million today. It's also one of the most recommended films by real veterans. One of them explained perfectly why it matters. It details an era of history that'll never be repeated, and who doesn't like a war movie where the good guys win? Billy Wilder wasn't exactly the guy you'd expect to direct a prisoner of war movie. He was known for comedies like Some Like It Hot, but Wilder had real reasons for making this one. He'd personally fled Nazi Germany himself, escaping first to Paris and then America, losing several family members at Auschwitz. Stalag 17 is based on a Broadway play written by two guys who were actual prisoners in Austria's Stalag 17B. William Holden stars as Sefton, a cynical guy who runs the camp's black market. When two prisoners die during an escape attempt, everyone assumes Sefton's a traitor, so he has to find out who the real informer is, and fast. Holden won the Oscar for Best Actor for this. Still, that was the film's only Oscar win, even though now it's considered one of Wilder's best movies. Clint Eastwood did something seriously ambitious here. He'd already made Flags of Our Fathers, about the American experience at Iwo Jima, but then he turned around and made Letters from Iwo Jima, showing the same battle entirely from the Japanese perspective. Ken Watanabe stars as General Kuribayashi, based on real letters the general wrote home to his family. Watanabe actually studied those letters closely to prep for the role. Most of the film was shot in the US and Iceland, though they did film a bit on the real Iwo Jima and even use footage of the USS Texas, the actual battleship involved in the battle. The movie got 4 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, which was huge considering it's almost entirely in Japanese, and audiences connected deeply, saying it was genuinely nice to see the war from a Japanese perspective. By the late 1940s, World War II combat films weren't exactly popular. Audiences had seen enough real fighting, but MGM decided to take a risk anyway, and ended up with one of the biggest hits of the year. Battleground follows a squad from the 101st Airborne trapped during the Battle of the Bulge. This movie didn't just do well, it basically reignited the whole war movie genre. Spielberg even cited Battleground as a big inspiration for him growing up. He said in an interview that the movie's portrayal of camaraderie and hardship made a huge impression on him, even if he didn't directly copy it for Saving Private Ryan. Veterans have connected with this movie for decades. One explained, "I remember watching Battleground as a kid on PBS. It gave me a real sense of patriotism. I saw the Army as a brotherhood." In 1969, Battle of Britain was Britain's biggest movie for 14 weeks straight, but critics didn't like it. Mixed reviews at best. Probably didn't help that anti-war sentiment was high around then, but looking back, it deserves way more credit for how historically accurate it actually is. You've got Michael Caine, Robert Shaw, Christopher Plummer, all these huge British stars recreating the 1940 Blitz, and director Guy Hamilton, instead of relying on miniatures or models, actually put real Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Messerschmitts in the sky. The filmmakers literally scoured the world, modified old trainers to look like German planes, and got Royal Air Force advisors, guys who'd flown real missions, to plan out the dogfights. And yes, some characters are merged or fictionalized, but historians generally agree the movie gets the main points right. In 2019, we got the big CGI spectacle version of Midway, but the 1976 original did things totally differently, and honestly, just as impressively. Instead of CGI, they reused real battle footage from earlier movies like Tora and Away All Boats, and shot a ton of new scenes on actual naval bases and the USS Lexington. Charlton Heston, Henry Fonda, Robert Mitchum, Hal Holbrook. Cast is basically a who's who of classic Hollywood actors. The film's main strength is that it doesn't just show the big brass making decisions, it covers the whole scope, from admirals right down to the everyday sailors. One veteran explained exactly why that mattered, saying, "The movie shows action from every level, command all the way down to common sailors. That's why, even decades later, people still recommend it."